5:30, Tuesday, June 22nd. And just a little preliminary process here. I don't know how long this will take. It's going to depend on how many people here are on the speakers list and want to speak. In the event that we are still here at 7 o'clock, we will take a short recess for 10 minutes. In the event where you're still here at 8 o'clock, we will then consider whether or not we are going to adjourn and restart the meeting at a later time, which we will inform you of at that time. So we'll see how we proceed. So,
Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Jindrat.
Yeah, I have to take the ferry, so I hope you finish before.
Okay, in the morning.
No, tonight.
Okay, well, we'll see how we're doing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, with that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining us and welcome you to the public hearing, which is being held electronically. This public hearing is being held to consider zoning amendment bylaw number 106566 to regulate residential guest accommodation use in the town of Gibsons. I begin this public hearing by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. The council members present this evening are Councillor Anne-Marie D'Andrade, Councillor David Kroll, and Councillor Stafford Lumley. Staff members present this evening are the Director of Planning, Leslie Ann Statz, the Deputy Corporate Officer, Tracy Hinks, and Recording Secretary, Lisa Evanson. I am Mayor Beamish and as chair and will chair this evening's proceedings. All persons who believe their interests are affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given an opportunity to be heard on the matters contained in the proposed bylaw, or to submit their written submissions to the corporate officer before tonight's hearing is adjourned. Once the meeting is adjourned, no further correspondence may be received on the matter. Under the Local Government Act, the chair of a public hearing is entitled to make procedural rules for the conduct of the public hearing. For this public hearing, we'll use the following protocol. Persons wishing to speak during the public hearing are invited to use the raise hand feature by clicking on the hand icon found at the bottom of your screen or pressing *9 on a telephone. The meeting administrator will then add you to the speakers list and you will be able to unmute, mute, and turn on your video when it is time to speak. Once your name has been called to speak, you'll be prompted with an invitation to become a panelist. Please accept that invitation to speak. Please identify yourself clearly by stating your name and residential address before beginning to address council. Speakers are allowed up to 5 minutes to make their presentation and may not transfer all or part of their allotted time to another speaker. A timer will be used and shown on the screen to assist in keeping track of time. Members of council are present to hear your submissions and not to answer questions or debate the merits of the bylaw under consideration. Council members may ask for clarification from members of the public after their submissions, and I would ask them to do that through me as well. Persons wishing to speak a second time may do so only after all other persons wishing to speak have been provided the opportunity to speak for a first time. Persons speaking for a second time will be limited to 3 minutes. If necessary, persons will also have the opportunity to speak a third time, and that will be limited to 2 minutes. Written submissions may be submitted via email to clerk@gibsons.ca in lieu of speaking, provided it is received prior to the close of the public hearing. All written submissions will be circulated to council and will become part of the public record. Leslie Ann Statz, the Director of Planning, will now introduce the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Leslie Ann, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I will just share my screen. I have a presentation. Sorry, I have to find it first. Sorry about this. No, I can't. Okay. So this presentation is about the residential guest accommodation zoning amendment bylaw 1065-66.
Director, your notes,
oh.
your notes are showing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Thank you for that, Mayor. Okay, so this we previously called residential guest accommodation short-term rentals. So just wanted to clarify that they are the same thing. Residential guest accommodation works better in the Gibson's context. So in October last year, Council established the following regulatory goals listed here in order of priority. Retaining the long-term rental supply is the #1 goal for these regulations. The primary goals, retaining the long-term rental supply and keeping the scale of businesses appropriate to residential neighborhoods, are bundled as they lead towards a more restrictive approach to regulating residential guest accommodation. Sorry? I'm getting some feedback. So the first two goals are bundled as they are a more restrictive approach to regulating residential guest accommodation. And the secondary goals, responding to the needs of homeowners who wish to have added revenue and providing tourists with accommodation options for staying in and visiting Gibson's, are bundled as they lean towards a more permissive approach to regulation. These goals reflect the seriousness of the current rental housing challenges in Gibson's and a strong desire to protect the character of residential neighborhoods while also creating opportunities for residents to earn a bit of extra income and ensure there are sufficient accommodation options for tourists in Gibson's. So after the goals were set in October last year, Council approved a statement of intent in January this year, which guided the direction for this zoning amendment. The statement of intent outlines a restrictive approach to regulating residential guest accommodation in 3 main components. The first is a housing-centric classification system to set up the rest of the program to protect housing. And so we've got some new definitions that are focused around this housing-centric classification system. The second is allowing principal residence RGAs in all zones to help advance Council's secondary goals without limiting or compromising their primary goals. And then the third part of the program is to temporarily allow a limited number of non-principal residence RGAs in desired areas, such as Lower Gibson's, where commercial guest accommodation is limited. But eventually, within 2 to 5 years, this temporary permission will be completely phased out. The intention for the temporary allowance is to avoid an immediate shock to the Gibson's tourism sector and to give Council some time to help get commercial guest accommodation established. So that temporary permission is through temporary use permits, and as written, it is prohibited in the bylaw. So zoning amendment 1065-66 is the bylaw before us today. So what's in it? There are new and updated definitions and terminology. So here in this screenshot, we've got a definition of principal residence, which I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read portions of it. Principal residence means a single dwelling unit where a person lives at least 9 months in a calendar year. And it talks about conducting your daily affairs. It talks about documentation that would prove that it's your residential address and so forth. Residential guest accommodation means the accessory use of a dwelling unit or a portion of a dwelling unit for the accommodation of paying guests, but is not a residential tenancy. And then we've got commercial guest accommodation, which means a building containing at least 5 contiguous units used for the accommodation of transient paying guests, and includes a lobby, can have dining and cooking facilities, business rooms, a spa, etc. So commercial guest accommodation used to be tourist accommodation. We also have new parking requirements for residential guest accommodation. So it would require 1 parking space per bedroom, up to a maximum of 4 parking spaces. We've got updated home occupation regulations. Most of them are the same, but there were limitations on the type of dwelling unit. So home occupations would now be allowed as an accessory use in any dwelling unit. We have no more reference to bed and breakfasts. Those are rolled into residential guest accommodation. And we have no more references to tourist accommodation, which is now rolled into commercial guest accommodation. So residential guest accommodation is the rental of a residential dwelling unit. So it could be your entire home, or it could be 1 or 2 bedrooms in your home, and you're renting it to paying guests. And it could be in any housing type. So it could be in an apartment, it could be in your home or in a bedroom in your home, in a secondary suite, in a garden suite, for a temporary period of time, and it's often facilitated by online platforms. So it is different than commercial guest accommodation and residential tenancy. So commercial guest accommodation includes hotels, motels, resorts, and it's a commercial use, and it's intended for a number of accommodation units. And it's different to residential tenancy, which is a long-term rental. So it would include, a residential tenancy includes all rentals covered by a tenancy agreement. So RGAs are permitted in any zone that allows a dwelling unit if it is your principal residence. So it is a home that you live in at least 9 months in a calendar year. It would be allowed, the RGA operator lives in the home during the guest stay. So this is intended to be the true home sharing approach, or the traditional bed and breakfast approach. And if the operator is not living in the dwelling unit during the guest stay, so if you are away on a work trip, away on vacation, or you are away from your home for a few months, it can only be rented for 3 consecutive months in a calendar year as residential guest accommodation. So all RGAs must have a valid business license and provide a parking plan. And the parking plan is part of the business license application. And RGAs are not allowed in RVs, so in any recreational vehicles, tents, boats, motor vehicles, or any other building or structure that is not a dwelling unit. So there's 2 types of RGAs. There's entire unit RGAs and partial unit RGAs. So for the entire unit, you will be able to rent your entire principal residence for a maximum of 3 consecutive calendar months in a calendar year. And again, the intention behind that is to share your home while you're away, and cover some costs and maybe make some revenue. The partial unit RGA rental is for you, where you will be able to rent up to 2 bedrooms in your principal residence year round. So you must be present during guest stays. So the process, where are we at in the process right now? So we've had first and second readings of the bylaw. They were given on June 21st. We've had 2 advertisements published in the Coast Reporter on the last 2 Fridays, so June 17th and the 24th. And the public hearing is held today on June 28th. Next step. So following this public hearing, Council will consider 3rd reading and adoption of the bylaw. So either in July, they break for August, so it would be either in July or September. Council may move forward with the bylaw after the public hearing. They might make changes or they might reject it. So if the bylaw does get adopted, it will come into effect immediately. If the regulations come into force this summer or fall, there will be a temporary grace period where existing residential guest accommodation operators will be asked to learn about the regulations, apply for a business license and a temporary use permit if applicable, or remove their listing from all online platforms if it is not permitted by the regulations, or if a business license is not granted. So the intention, if this does come into force, we would begin active enforcement on January 1st, 2023. So there are additional bylaws that have been drafted to regulate RGAs, and this includes updates to the business license bylaw and the enforcement bylaw. So although the zoning amendment bylaw is the subject of the public hearing, these two bylaws support the zoning amendment bylaw and support the entire policy. So under the business license bylaw, only individuals, not companies, will be allowed to operate an RGA. Companies can still help with things like maintenance and managing complaints, but it is individual operators who must hold the business license, whose name and contact information appear in a listing and advertisements, and who are ultimately responsible for ensuring that the residential guest accommodation complies with the town's bylaws. Both owners and renters can operate an RGA with strata and landlord approvals as applicable. Up to a maximum of 2 licenses would be allowed per person, one for the partial unit RGA, so a bedroom or 2 bedrooms in your home, or one for an entire unit RGA, so that would be your entire home if you're away. But it must, the business licenses must only be for the same dwelling unit. And a business license cannot be transferred to another unit or property. So to apply for a business license for an RGA, an applicant must provide proof that the home is their principal residence, would have to receive written authorization from a strata council if it was in an apartment, for example, or the property owner. So say it's a secondary suite, you'd have to have landlord permission. You'd have to install smoke alarms, a fire extinguisher, carbon monoxide detector, have a fire safety plan in place, and a first aid kit. So there are safety measures in place. A parking plan would have to be provided to meet the parking bylaw or the requirements under the zoning amendment for parking. And you would also have to provide contact information for a designated responsible person. So under the business license amendment bylaw, this designated responsible person must be able to respond to a complaint within 30 minutes. And before a license would be issued, a site inspection will take place. So the next 2 slides show a list of penalties that can be charged daily. So this is the enforcement bylaw, which is 1125-14, that list the infractions that are associated with the zoning amendment and the business license amendment. So I won't read them all, but there are a list of infractions here. Basically, if you're going to operate outside of your principal residence, if you're going to rent it for more than say 3 months of the calendar year that you hadn't applied for, or if you've got more than 2 bedrooms for rent, there would be fines that could be charged daily. And then under the business license bylaw, there are the following list of infractions. So marketing without a license, not showing your license number, not meeting the parking plan, not having safety measures, etc. So that sums up my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Planning. I'll now ask the Deputy Corporate Officer, Tracy Hinks, to note and present any written submissions received to date regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. As you can see by the amended agenda package consolidated this afternoon, there were 15 written submissions from 20 individuals. Of these submissions, 5 were in opposition of the opposed bylaw, 12 were in support of the proposed bylaw, and 3 were neutral. The amended agenda package was published at 4 p.m. on June 28th, 2022. Now, one additional written submission was received after the preparation of the agenda. Kelly Foley from the Sunshine Coast Housing Action Table submitted the following email correspondence at 4:07 June 28th, 2022. And it reads, "Dear Ms. Stats, residential guest accommodations. On behalf of the Sunshine Coast Housing Action Table, I would like to extend our support for the new bylaw regulating residential guest accommodations in Gibsons. We recommend Council's primary goal of retaining long-term rental supply in Gibsons with these regulations, and feel that in our current undeniable daily worsening housing crisis, that endeavoring to make any impact in this direction is absolutely necessary. Relatedly, one of the objectives in our new strategic framework is support local government in implementing and enforcing policies designed to protect long-term rental stock. As the town of Gibsons knows well, this is hardly a special interest in our community, but rather a crisis that is affecting everyone. Sincerely, Kelly Foley, Sunshine Coast Housing Coordinator, Sunshine Coast Housing Action Table." And I have one further one that just popped up on my screen. I'm just going to bring my email over here. This one is from Chinmay Dalal. Sorry if I got that wrong. "I am against this new bylaw, including the two supporting bylaws." And those are, and that came in just at 5:52. And I have, as noted, individuals may choose to forward written submissions via email to clerk@gibsons.ca up to the close of this public hearing. Those submissions will be collated at adjournment and circulated to council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Corporate Officer. We will now seek public input. This is your opportunity. Is there anybody wishing to speak for or against proposed zoning amendment bylaw?
So
Please signal. Yeah, go ahead.
So Kim Darwin is going to be promoted to the gallery or to the panelist.
Thank you. Kim Darwin, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you well and we see you.
Excellent. So again, my name is Kim Darwin and I'm calling from 5434 U Road in Seashelt. But today I'm actually wearing my Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society Vice Chair hat. So for the record, Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society is in favor of the Town of Gibson's proposed residential guest accommodation bylaw. We consider it a tool that prioritizes the preservation of long-term rental stock, along with the quiet enjoyment of residential homeowners. And this proposed bylaw, it aligns quite nicely with our society mission and vision and values, which are to work towards supporting affordable housing for all citizens who live and work on the Sunshine Coast. And just before I start chatting a little bit more about it, I did want to pose the question, and you did mention it in your introduction, but the use of the term residential guest accommodation, I've been trying all week to remember what RGA stands for. I'm wondering if it's a trend that consultants are working towards in this area, or if they're migrating towards it versus the more familiar short-term rental accommodation. term that we're used to. And sort of my fear is that if a person's seeking the information on the Town of Gibson's website, that they might miss it due to the unfamiliarity of the term. But I'll leave that for answers later. So in April 2021, Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society, in conjunction with 7 of our local community groups, we sent a joint letter to all Sunshine Coast local governments, including the Town of Gibson's, asking for short-term rental regulations. So we're really pleased to see the efforts are being made in this regard. And then in my day job, I'm sort of in this unique position. I'm a mortgage broker and I've been in the real estate industry for 35 years here on the Sunshine Coast. So I get to collect income information by way of mortgage applications. So I have the privilege to learn how much many people in our community earn and what shelter costs that they can afford based on, the traditional shelter affordability ratios. And we all know from our housing studies that median home prices have increased well over 100% since 2016, which has caused both mortgage payments and rents to increase along with it. So often I work with people who've been given notice to vacate their long-term rental homes for one reason or the other, and they simply cannot find another affordable replacement. And more often than not, especially lately, I have to dash their dreams of local home ownership as well, due to the high cost of housing. And as of late, they're really increasing high interest rates. So what does this all, end up with? Our community is simply losing our working age people as a result of these issues. And we all know local employers are all struggling to attract and retain skilled employees as a direct result of the shortage of homes available for rent. And this, of course, affects all of us with service levels, et cetera. And we know that more and more people are paying far more than what is healthy or practical towards their shelter costs. And it's kind of an embarrassment to see that happening in our community. And local governments and municipalities, you really have just a limited number of tools that you're able to exercise to effect a change and have improvements towards the housing crisis. And to Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society, this proposed bylaw that we're speaking about today represents the Town of Gibson's exercising one of those tools as a responsible government who's taking action. So it's also the fastest way to put potential rental stock onto the market. Using pre-existing homes is way easier, faster, and cheaper than constructing new dwellings for this purpose, as we know with construction costs. And one thing is absolutely certain, that if a property is being used as a short-term rental, if it's the only building being used without an on-site operator, it's not helping address the shortage of the long-term rentals. And then I really want to hammer this home. One of the myths that's been argued when it comes to RGAs or SDRs, some people say that the money generated is necessary in order to help people meet their mortgage payments. Lenders for residential mortgage financing do not let us use STR or RGA income as part of a mortgage application to qualify for residential mortgage financing. So that is a myth. Actually, whenever am I over my time?
I'm going to have to call time on you. You are welcome to come back.
Absolutely. That's pretty much all I had to say. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Megan McLean. I'm going to promote her to panelist.
Yep.
Hello.
Yep. Welcome.
So Megan McLean, I'm at 633 Gower Point Road, and I'm opposed to the proposal. So thank you for letting me have a chance to speak. I've spoken at one of the previous public consultations, but as a Airbnb or short-term rental host, I still feel like I haven't been heard by council other than Councillor Lumley. So in general, I do agree with much of what the consultant and the city staff has brought forward, as I do believe that there should be permits in place for residential guest accommodations, but there are some key points that I'm opposed to. So along with my husband, we have operated one short-term rental in the past 5.5 years. We consider ourselves to be part of the community. So we are Airbnb super hosts, have over 300 reviews on Airbnb, but let me describe what our situation is. So people rent our suite as they have their own separate suite and do not need to interact with us. We do not live full-time in Gibsons because we have to split our time between Vancouver and the Sunshine Coast because we work in Vancouver. We only rent out our suite when we are not there, as the sounds travel, because we have a 2.5-year-old. So that's why we can't do it while we're there. When we're in our home, we often have personal guests, including friends and family. And since we're with our guests, we usually are contributing by going out a lot more than we usually would do by ourselves. So that's why we choose to keep it for ourselves as well. Having the suite provides us with flexibility. We own the house a bit bigger so that we're always able to have friends and family stay with us. We would not be able to turn our suite into long-term housing due to the configuration of our house and the need for flexibility. The timeline is very unrealistic that I hear proposed. So the Stonehurst project and the George keep being mentioned as a big part of the solution for phasing out the non-permanent residences. The Stonehurst will have approximately 6 boutique style accommodations, with the George potentially having much more. The George, as you're well aware by now, has an expired building permit, so that will realistically not happen for a while. The fee structure is very restrictive, aimed at large houses who make a lot of money. The fees are aimed at large houses that run as businesses, not people like myself who do this once in a while to supplement their mortgage or rent once in a while when they're away for a week or a weekend. The mayor in the last special council meeting mentioned that he knows a person that makes under $30,000 3 months in the summer so that they can stay under paying the extra government taxes. This comment makes it sound like Airbnbs and Gibsons are making enormous amounts of money, and this is not the case for us. We should not be funding a bylaw officer in the same proportion as a large house that can make much, much more than us per night. Councillor Lumley is absolutely correct in that we do need a cross-section of rentals for tourism, not just giant houses, a room in a house where the owner is in, or during the winter time when a snowbird may rent out their house. I do understand why the priorities of the town have shifted to prioritize long-term housing, but I'm dismayed that they have been, that we've been kind of taken the brunt of that as a short-term housing. So we are fully in support of all levels of government providing more rentals as there is a housing crisis. We believe our short-term rental instead addresses the tourism piece of the 4 goals. We should not forget that it's not just tourists that stay in our accommodation. And I just want to close with a snapshot of who has stayed in our place and why. And this is from interactions with guests. So we have had extended families that can't fit into their family's house when they came to visit. We've had prospective Sunshine Coast residences, including people who are wanting to work in the healthcare system. We have obviously tourists from outside of Canada who chose Airbnb as a brand. Owners from local businesses that do not live here but do need to stay a night. Parents of sports players are out of town or in town for a tournament but don't want to stay in the local hotels. And then even workers that have come to stay for a night or two and cannot find other places to stay. So thank you for your consideration at the types of and to look at the non-residential guest accommodations and lowering the fees for an accommodation such as ours and keeping Stream 2 permanently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan, for your presentation.
Okay, next we have David Kipling.
Trying to do that. Okay, here I am. Hi, David.
Staff, could we ask, could we move Megan McLean off the screen, please?
Oh, who's going off the screen?
Megan McLean is going.
Oh,
But thank you. Okay.
Okay, I'm not David Kipling. It's just
No.
I'm on his computer. It's Kathleen Vance. I live at 301 Headlands in Gibsons. I completely support all the regulations. If you want to make them stronger, it's fine with me. If you know, I have already submitted something in writing to the mayor and council on this, but I just want to say how strongly I feel about this. And what I mentioned in my written submission is Cwmer Egg Lewis. Cwmer Egg Lewis is a quaint seaside town in Wales that has one permanent resident left. And the rest of it is all homes of more than £1 million. Everybody moved out, and nobody who can work in that town could afford a home. And all the businesses shut down, and there's one ice cream stand left. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's crazy. That'll never happen in Gibsons. Well, I never thought that a house that wasn't on the water, that was far away from the water, would go for over $1 million. I never thought that was possible. I have people I know in Gibsons who tried to buy a house in Gibsons and couldn't. Why? Somebody outbid them by over 100,000. And they said those people were outbidding them, and they spend $100,000 like it's chump change. So what has happened is we've got this huge international market. We've got a growth of wealth around the world that is incredible. We've got a cheap internet that lets you market everywhere. And the consequence is, I mean, they say the revolution devours its children, but I think the revolution has nothing on the unregulated free market for devouring its children, because that's what's happening here. People can't afford to live here. They can't afford to work here. It does me no good to tell me I can get, 700,000 or whatever for my house. What good does that do to me? I want to die there. I don't want to sell it. If I sold it, I have to live somewhere else. I can't sell it and give my son or my grandchild the money because they couldn't afford to buy anywhere else. So it does me no good. It does me no good that a worker can't live here who I need to repair my roof, or who I might need to paint my house or help with the upkeep, or who might be my dance teacher or my fitness instructor, or heaven forbid, my doctor or the nurse or the therapist at the local hospital. What can I do if those people can't live in my neighborhood? And the other thing that's happening is socially it's changing the neighborhood. I was with my grandchild. We were taking pictures of the deer in the street. And a woman, she's a kind, nice woman, I'm sure, but she stopped us and she looked at us and she said, "You don't live here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking pictures." And she was furious with me because she saw me as an interloper in the neighborhood. And I thought, this is sad. We're all getting suspicious of each other. I think we have to stop it. We have to stop we have to realize that people want to live here. They want homes. And we cannot just, people want second, third homes while other people have no homes. That's not right. I mean, there's no religion that would accept that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I cannot tell you how strongly and how much I am glad that council has put forward these regulations. I really am. Now I understand. Oh, good, I got one more minute. That it's very strong. And someone was just telling me that it's one of the strongest anywhere, so I support it. They told me in San Francisco, they tried to have it where you could only get what was called short-term rental if you stayed for a month. You know what happened? Rich people came in, they just bought the whole month. They said, we don't care if we're just staying a few nights. So this is the way to go with licensing, paying for the regulation, and really keeping an eye on it. I think that you've made a really good choice. And please don't listen to anybody who wants it weakened. And I guess I'll just stop even early. Just remember Cwmer Egg Lewis.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Next on our speakers list, we have Blake McLeod, be promoted to panelist.
Oh, I get to mute.
Mr. McLeod, welcome.
Hey, gang. I support it. I think it's great. I think the most important aspect of it is that it goes after the big business end of things, and the idea of these party homes. I was really moved by one of the letters in the agenda package where a person, a family across the street was being essentially felt like they were being forced out of their neighborhood because I think it was a corporation that had taken over. And then every weekend or quite frequently there was these large groups of people, and they were there to party, and you know, that's not a crime on its own, but the nature of the sort of the drinking and the leaving litter around and so on, they don't see the big picture of that, of course. The guests that happens over and over again, and it changes the nature of the neighborhood. So I think that end of things is really great. I was also moved by the comments of someone who explained their own situation, much the same as an earlier speaker tonight did, where they felt that there needed to, I mean, not to reject it wholly, of course, but just that there needs to be some sort of a more of a nuanced approach or way perhaps to hear special cases. And I don't know how you'd put together or set up guidelines for how that would be. It's almost like a star chamber or something, which nobody wants, but just that idea that people would have a chance to plead their case, because I think there are some cases out there that fall through the cracks and could legitimately be considered an exception. And I wonder if council might just consider maybe asking staff to think a little more about that, a way to implement some kind of sideline or secondary sort of step that people could take. And I think obviously, you know, we are talking about the commodification of the Sunshine Coast and the effects that it is having on the community already in many ways, not just this issue, are being felt by the residents, and they're feeling, I think people are feeling quite overwhelmed. And so the council's taking this step is a great move, but there are also people who are very dependent on this income and are kind of, I think they've got their futures planned out as to what they can expect. The woman who spoke earlier about having their foot in two ponds in Vancouver and here, you know, that sounds to me like some consideration could be given and so on, not to throw the whole thing out, of course, because it's great. It's obviously lots of work has gone into it. And I think that so many of the social problems are going to be solved by this, just as it is. But also, I think we have to be careful not to create any for people as individuals as it is, and to assume that just because somebody owns a home and perhaps might be perceived by the community as being wealthy because they do, or because they can have a suite in their home, or whatever the circumstances are, people work hard. And to just assume because somebody has the level of privilege and wealth to own a home, it doesn't mean that they're not counting to some extent the pennies or whatever the case may be. So I do support it strongly. And I think that this could be done well, and I think it's darn close. This could be an example to other communities as a way of really turning things around. It's not going to solve our affordability crisis, but it's also not going to make it worse, and it has been making it worse. So thanks for all the thoughtful work that staff has put into this. And that's really it from me. Thank you.
Mr. McLeod, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. McLeod, if you would state your address for the record, please.
Thank you. 1014 Venture Way in Gibsons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our speakers list, we have Des Delaney being promoted as panelist.
Mr. Delaney, welcome. You're still muted and we can't see you.
Unmute.
Oh, there you are. Okay. There you are.
There we
Yeah,
go. Sorry about
welcome.
that. Yeah, just my comments are going to be addressed at the bylaw itself, not against anybody involved in putting the bylaw together. a decade before this council was voted in, B&B existed in this community, and in fact, quite well. There was $100 business license fee. It was classified as a home-based business. And even in the first year of this council, letters were being sent out on behalf of council advising the 50 to 60 operators that they were covered under the existing bylaw, which is still the current one as of this minute for the town, that it meant they had to take out a business license for their B&B, which again was defined as a 2-bedroom suite in a house or a bedroom in a house. This current council decided that they wanted to chat with the operators in the formation of putting this bylaw together. And so they sent out from their list of business licenses, and they identified the names and addresses of all those people on the business license. They sent out an invitation to attend some sessions, and this was put on by a consultant that the town of Gibson's employed and gave the information to the consultant to attend the meeting. Now, that list consisted of the names were round about 80% female. And most of the people at the sessions were female as well. They were women living in this town that had been running these businesses. And so therefore, everybody was aware at that time that this is a home-based business that is run primarily by women, and it is their main income. So I guess this bylaw does show some prejudice to this sector of the community by imposing harsh restrictions, who are all women. The Webster Dictionary describes this as misogyny. Now, if one person decides to rent out a suite in their house, and just as a long-term rental for $3,000, $5,000 a month, they're not subjected to any of these proposed bylaw restrictions. Now, if that same person decides that they wish to do a residential accommodation, then they are basically restricted with expensive cost to operate, just basically treated entirely differently. The Webster Dictionary, Human Rights of Canada describe this as discrimination. Now, on top of this, a lot of the supporting documentation for this bylaw, including the primary goal, which is retain long-term rental supply in Gibson's and to scale appropriate to residential neighbourhoods. Well, it seems strange to me that the same suite in that residential neighbourhood, whether it's used for long-term or for residential guest accommodation, it already exists in the neighbourhood and is already appropriate scale. It's been, Town of Gibson's has issued a permit for it for a suite. It's a legal suite. They've already taken that into account. And to retain the long-term rental supply in Gibson's, there is absolutely no credible data whatsoever that supports the theory that these bylaw regulations will actually increase any long-term rentals in any manner and form. The statement that accessory suites that might otherwise be used as LTR, no data. Decreased overall housing availability and affordable, no data for Gibson's. However, clear exaggeration factor in rental housing availability and affordability. All this that's being promoted is basically along the lines of a person who obstinately and intolerantly devoted to his or own opinions or prejudice, or one who regards or treats members of a group with hatred or intolerance. This is defined by the Webster's Dictionary as bigot. And, this report was done by a consultant living in Victoria. I've got more to go on another aspect, so I'll wait for the second round on this.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney.
Mr. Delaney, could you state your address?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I apologize for that. It's 557 Wildwood Crescent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on our speakers list, we have Clifford Sutton, who will be promoted to panelist.
Mr.
Hello, can you
Sutton,
hear me?
welcome. Welcome.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. My wife already submitted some written comments, so I'll try my best not to just repeat those, but I will maybe summarize the situation just so you know where I'm coming from. We have a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. I'm sorry, I should say my address is 575 Marine Drive. We're right across from Armours Beach. Our second building on our property, I don't really like to call it garden suite because it's not appropriate for long-term habitation. It is our second bedroom. It is where our friends and family stay when they come to visit us. When we don't have visitors, it's on Airbnb. It will never be a long-term rental. That's just never going to happen. It would be to the detriment of us being able to host, the people that we care to have. However, I think we're in a great location. We're walking distance to all kinds of restaurants and amenities here in Lower Gibsons, and not that we provide a public service, but I do think it is important to have accommodations for tourists. I don't think you will get them built in the next 3 years. And even when they are, I don't know about you guys. I travel, I prefer not staying in hotels. I love staying in Airbnbs. I like different types of accommodation. And I think Gibsons would be lacking if it only had hotel rooms. So that's where I'm coming at this from. I guess I also wanted to express, that I have some disappointment with this process. We entered into it in good faith with the town at the beginning, attended some meetings, and felt like we were being listened to. And things went silent for a while, and then it seems like this was sprung on us in just a couple of weeks, and it's being rammed through here without very much consultation, apart from what we're going through right now. I think that the report you guys got from that gentleman in Victoria, I'm afraid I don't remember his name, but I did listen to his presentation last week. I think it was faulty. I think he gave you some bad advice. I don't think you want this law to be a blunt instrument. I think there needs to be some subtleties to it. I think the worst legislation is always blunt in nature. I think then I find myself agreeing with what Mr. McLeod said earlier, which is that, maybe there needs to be a way to sort of review some one-off situations, because generally I am for a bylaw for short-term rental. I'm aware of the problems with them. I'm aware of the housing shortage, but I don't think you're going to solve it with this approach. And I think you're going to do a lot more harm to the town trying to do that. I think the housing shortage and affordability crisis has been decades in the making. It's a failure of government at all levels. And I think it's fundamentally unfair to act like it's up to us homeowners to solve it. You're really placing the burden on us. I don't operate a short-term rental because it's particularly lucrative. If somebody's making $30,000 in a summer, that's shocking to me. We might do $11,000 a year. The licensing fees you're looking at would be a full third of our yearly income on it. So, I may not even choose to pursue Stream D. It might not even be worth it at that point, I think that's really all I have to say. I'm willing to cede the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Next on the speakers list, we have Mike Norton.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I'll start video. There we go.
Welcome, Mr. Norton.
Yes, thank you. 709 Steinbrunner. And yeah, I have a couple notes, but I 100% oppose this. I agree with Councillor Lumley's angle about the tourism industry being mostly affected by this. I was talking to the Chamber of Commerce today and the Gibsons Chamber of Commerce, that is. And I think with the city of Gibson's, basically, you have about 4 hotels there. And the capacity that you have at most of these hotels is 52 rooms, 47 rooms, and the 2 other Sunshine Lodge, call it 100 rooms there too. If the BC ferries is accurate with how many tourists go through the Sunshine Coast each year. From May to about October, they claim there's about 1 million people that come through the Sunshine Coast. That's not to say they're all going to Gibson's. They're also going up to Half Moon Bay. They're going up to like up the coastline. But tourism is the main industry of Gibson's. The local businesses in here that my Airbnb support is like the revenue that I bring in. So I wrote an email to you guys, and thank you very much for responding. I think there's a few points that I just like to make about this. And Councillor Ludwig was asking at the June 14th meeting, she was talking about the percentage of taxes. So Airbnb, I believe, takes about 10% or 8% of our taxes, of that tax, they call it. 2% of that tax actually should technically be going back to the city of Gibson's. Those subsidies, I believe, in my opinion, you take those 2% and you could even get it up to 3%. You could, okay, so just running the numbers, Airbnb shows about 302 properties in Gibson's, on average 250 a night, say on average 40% occupancy. So that's about 146 nights per year. That totals about 36.5 per property, 302. So on average, there's about $11 million on the table that people, tourists, are spending to come to the city of Gibson's. 2% of that tax, you could technically, if you apply properly and go through the proper channels, get about $220,000 annually back to the city of Gibson's to be used as subsidies, to be used as affordable housing, to really boost the economy and build new homes. If you bump that to 3%, that's $330,000. I think the biggest hurdle that we need to face right now is, I agree with Clifford Sutton, I agree with Megan McLean. We're rushing through these bylaws a bit too fast. I would love to hear from Tourism BC. I would love to hear from the Gibson's Visitor Center this evening. I'd love to have someone from the Chamber of Commerce this evening listening in. I'd like a public forum more in person and really sit down and talk to the operators and get feedback from us of, hey, what can we do? And it's ironic that just today, Airbnb, with the party homes people have mentioned tonight, they have put in new, they call it serious consequences, ranging from account suspension to complete removal from the platform for any of these so-called party homes. And a suggestion that I've spoken to a few other hosts, what I have done in the past now, I have this app called Minute, and it measures decibels. So I could always find out in my, like, what time people are going to bed and what time. It doesn't measure sound, it doesn't listen into anything, but it just measures sound. So I could always go back. And so like, I don't want to be known as a party house. I have uncles, aunts, cousins, nieces, nephews in Gibson's. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old. I want to have my cabin up there. I want to spend the rest of my life on the Sunshine Coast. I feel welcome there, but I really want to have a longer discussion and invite more operators to chime in and discuss this. And it's the old expression, you put a dime or 10 cents on the table and you slide it back and forth until you come to an agreement. And I agree with Clifford when he says, I think this is a little bit being railroaded through, but I appreciate your time, Mayor and councillors, and yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Norton.
Next on our speakers list, we have Annie Wise, to be promoted to panelist.
Hey there.
Hi, Annie. Yeah, welcome.
Thank Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Annie Wise, and I am the Executive Director of Sunshine Coast Tourism, which for anyone listening who isn't aware, we also operate the Gibson's Visitor Center. I'd like to thank the Town of Gibson staff, mayor, and council for your careful consideration of these regulations. We appreciate the difficulty and nuance of the discussion with many different perspectives and conflicting interests. And as a resident of the Sunshine Coast myself and a longtime renter, I am well aware, both personally and professionally, of some of the challenges surrounding the issue and the decisions you have before you. I firmly believe that tourism is the economic lifeblood of our community, and it provides many benefits to all residents of the region, whether they realize it or not. And as an association, Sunshine Coast Tourism supports reasonable compliance measures to ensure that residential guest accommodations are accountable to the town for the health and safety of both residents and guests in our community. First off, I'd like to note some of the economic value that residential guest accommodations provide within Gibson's, calculated using data from our AirDNA license and research published by Destination BC. We can share that we reasonably believe that short-term rental guests contributed approximately $9.5 million in local spending within Gibson's in the last year. In addition to this economic information, I'd like to express a couple of additional thoughts and concerns and my encouragement to you to make your final decisions with a balanced approach. So first of all, limiting short-term rentals, or sorry, I'm using the terms interchangeably, but RGAs to a certain number of operation days per year. There's some categories where you're looking at limiting to 3 months or 90 days. We're very concerned as an association that this will negatively impact the winter and shoulder season. It has been our mandate and supported by the town of Gibson's to grow tourism in the winter and shoulder season when it's most needed to support the local economy. And while it's not a guarantee, it's highly possible that operators will choose to host when the lucrative summer months come and the most revenue can be made. And so this really works at cross purposes with what we're trying to achieve to create a more sustainable tourism economy year-round. Secondly, I do applaud the inclusion within this plan of more long-term planning with regard to commercial guest accommodation. However, I do not believe that the stated plans in the policy are adequate whatsoever. The policy as written states that the George will be built in the near term and that the Stonehurst is in progress. And with the recent expiration of the George's permit and drastic changes to the Stonehurst plans, it is my perspective that there is in fact no new commercial guest accommodation on the horizon in the next 2 years when the first phase of the temporary use permits are set to expire. I would strongly urge you to review these timelines in regard to both the phase approach with the TUPs and also just a stronger plan with regards to attracting new commercial guest accommodation in terms of your timeline. Further to this point, even on a phased approach, the suggested 50 temporary use permits will in fact still be a shock to the business environment in Gibson's that depend on residential guest accommodations currently. Our data via AirDNA shows that there are 118 unique whole home units rented in the last 12 months in Gibson's. And these units, I believe, would all fall into the category of requiring temporary use permits in your new proposed regulations. I think it's important to understand and acknowledge the disparity between 118 and 50 and know that you're potentially turning upwards of 70 units, many of which are more than double occupancy away on any given day. And that would translate into millions of dollars in local spending. And lastly, I just wanted to make sure that council is aware of the impact that banning a significant number of short-term rentals will have on the MRDT income for our region and Sunshine Coast Tourism's programs. One particular program that we created in the last 2 years is specifically related to affordable housing initiatives. As many of you know, the Airbnbs in the region collect from their paying guests, and that money is returned to our community in the form of an affordable housing fund. Last year, we sent about $86,000 to the SCRD for their regional plan, and this spring we expect to send about $95,000. So I just wanted to point out that this funding will most definitely decrease with the implementation of your proposed regulations, and I just want that to factor into your decision making. So that's all I have to share at this time. Thank you for your time and consideration, and know that Sunshine Coast Tourism values its important relationship with the town of Gibson's.
Thank you, Annie. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Next on our speakers list, we have Matthew Chan, being promoted to panelist.
Mr.
Hello.
Chan, welcome.
Yes, hi. Hi, welcome. Hi, council. Thank you for having me on. I am at 862 O'Shea Road, and I just want to say some of my thoughts. I overall oppose supporting restricting regulation of SDRs. I do support further regulation, which I feel is important. I am an Airbnb host. I split my time between Sunshine Coast and the Lower Mainland. And when I'm not using my property, I believe I serve an important need to the community. You know, I've hosted workers that do important work in Gibsons. Have had vacationers that contribute funds and spending into the community. Have families visiting, and they've all told me that they want privacy. So they're not likely to rent a home without the benefit of having privacy. So, and the current commercial accommodations just don't suit their needs. So by having a sudden stoppage of short-term rentals, we're I think just implementing too big of a shock into our system. So I believe at the very least there should be some type of phase approach just to see what the consequences are, because I echo some of the previous speakers that there are a lot of money that's being injected into the community through short-term rentals. And I just want to say that I believe I'm like many short-term renters. I'm very responsible. I haven't had a single complaint from any of my neighbors. In fact, I get along very well with my neighbors. I'm very selective with who I rent my home to. Never have any parties or anything like that. It's always to people who are respectful, businesses. So as a result, I haven't had any issues, and I feel that there should be some leniency to people who are not contributing to the issue of parties and all the issues that are being brought forward. Furthermore, I want to say that, you know, as an owner of a property in the Sunshine Coast, I'm not 100% certain that restricting this will improve the rental situations, because many of these people who own homes will just simply keep it vacant when they're not using it. And so now you're not only restricting the properties for long-term rentals, but you're now prohibiting guests from coming in and injecting money into our communities that's supporting the local businesses. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chan.
We have one more person with their hand up, Mike Norton, who's already spoken. If Mayor, would you like to go into round two?
Yeah, if that's where we are, we'll clear Mr. Chan off, and that way he can have his privacy. Thank you. So that being said, we are now going then to the next opportunity. Councillor Kroll, sorry.
Through you, Mayor Beamish, I noticed there's a lady there by the name of Kathleen who hasn't spoken. I don't believe.
Councillor Kroll, she's
David
with under
Kipling.
David
Okay.
Kipling's, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we will go then to round two, and this is where we ask if there's anybody who wishes to speak a second time for or against proposed zoning. And for speaking a second time, you have up to 3 minutes, and we'll be timing you once again. So welcome back. Mr. Norton.
Sorry, thank you again for having me. Just a few notes I just wanted to throw in there. I don't know if I mentioned before, I was talking to a fellow, and Squamish Council just put through a whole bunch of restrictions for short-term rentals, and their experience after the fact of very restrictive ones, they've definitely gone back to the drawing board, and a few of them that we've spoken to say that they almost regret that some of the strict regulations that they've done. And just really quickly, I just wanted to add the interest rates have gone up twice already in the last like year. I'm a lumber broker, so I'm in the lumber industry, and I see it in my industry, and I see it all across business right now. I know they call it stagflation right now. We are just about, with inflation going through the roof, we are just about to go into a massive recession. They said, there was a newspaper article out of Toronto last week that they said, if interest rates go up one more time, 1 in 4 Canadians won't be able to afford their mortgages. We are about to go into a major housing crash. I wouldn't call it a crash, but we're going to go into a major recession where all additional funds and like money and scraping by, like we are struggling right now. And I fear that if you guys start restricting 90 days and who could operate and who can't operate and all this other stuff, we're going to create a bigger crisis than anything else. So I just ask for the sake of all these things going on, that you guys reconsider, take it slow, talk to other people, and I appreciate you guys' help, and thank you for hearing me a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Norton.
Next, we have Des Delaney moving over.
Mr. Delaney, welcome.
Oops.
Thank you. So I'm aware that there's a construction project in the town of Gibsons that's just started. We're well aware that there is no accommodation for any already for tradespeople on the coast. This project will last for the next 2.5 years. It will require 120 people starting, my understanding is starting in July or August, at about 50, going to 120 for the next 2 years to be completed. Additionally, the Kiwanis project will probably be starting for the 75 units, which will also require a large number of off-coast workforce. And in fact, for any building on the coast from here on in, the only way it can be built because of the lack of long-term rental housing will be through the people that open up their homes to rent it out. On that basis, in the Gibsons area, basically, when you have those sorts of numbers and the going rate is $2,000 per room per person, basically the current Airbnbs can quite easily convert over the next couple of months because of this regulation to long-term rentals, which is what everybody's after. However, those long-term rentals will all be off-coast people for the next several years, taking all that accommodation up. There will be no income for the town, none. There will be no inspections, there'll be nothing. These will be long-term leases, which will be over 30 days. After 30, even if they're renewed every 30 days, they will not be subjected to these regulations. Now, I don't know if anybody's thought about that, because how can you build without people? And if you don't have accommodation for people to build now, you need to bring them in. And if you don't have the accommodation to bring them in, well, guess what? It doesn't work. When you need 12 and you have 10, taking 4 out, 8 doesn't work, does it? So, it's just something that needs to be considered in the big picture. We actually need 3 times more in it to be able to achieve any accommodation. Like if for some reason this Shore Road affordable housing needs to be built, that's another probably 50 or 100 people that we need to accommodate. Where are we going to accommodate them? So guess what? We can't build the long-term rental housing without this housing that we have right now that this bylaw will destroy. Like it's just, I don't know. I'm obviously firmly opposed, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of time being wasted here with the realities of what's going to happen in this community in the next few months. So we'll just see how it plays out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney.
Mayor Beamish, we have Chris Newmeyer, who has not had a chance to speak yet. I'm going to promote to panelist for 5 minutes, if that's okay with you.
That's fine, yeah. First time, yeah.
Oh, Blake?
No, it's Chris Newmeyer.
Hi, I'm Chris Newmeyer. I'm from the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society.
Thank you.
And I was also previously, I managed a brewery here in Gibson's. And there's been a lot of talk in this panel about workers and how affordable or the Airbnbs can be used to house workers. And one of the things we need to keep in mind is the reason we're having a shortage of workers is because we have a shortage of long-term housing. I don't think the solution, if we want to talk about workers, is Airbnbs for them. The issue is that we don't have housing for people on the coast who would work those jobs. And we need to start looking more towards regulations such as this, which do support that, which are looking at preserving the long-term rentals here on the Sunshine Coast. And I think this is an excellent regulations and bylaws that I'm in support of, and my organization is in support of as well. And so I just wanted to reiterate that if we're talking about workers not being able to find accommodations, those should be long-term workers. We want these workers to live and work on the Sunshine Coast. We don't want them to have 30-day renewable leases month after month. That's not how you develop roots in a community like this. And I'm really happy that council has prioritized this preservation of long-term rental housing and preserving that stock. And this is a good first step towards that. I don't think, I'll reiterate, because I've heard it a few times, I don't think we need to look towards short-term rentals for housing these workers. And then there's a talk about promoting tourism on the Sunshine Coast. Any business here that does rely on tourism can tell you there is a severe lack of workers on the Sunshine Coast. And I ran into this when I was running a brewery here, when I was managing a brewery's tap room. We had issues where young people here would say, it's $1,600 for me to rent a place here. I'm 20, why wouldn't I just live in Vancouver? So we need to look at housing that helps accommodate those workers long-term. And if we're focusing on Airbnbs to help the tourism industry, when the places that the tourism industry is relying on can't have those workers, I think we're just going to be in a downward spiral. So I just want to say that I really support council's taking this initiative on. And thank you for your time. I forgot to say my address, which is 1460 North Road. But thank you very much, and I yield my time.
Chris, thank you very much for your presentation.
Next, we have Robin.
Hi there. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see me. I just wanted to provide.
Sorry, Robin, your last name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robin Leafers, and I'm on 495 South Fletcher.
Thank you.
So I agree with much of what has been said on both sides. I know there's a need for long-term housing. So, and there are concerns around, tourism, inflation, all those types of things. The one thing, and I am an Airbnb host, the one thing I think that we need to think through as well that hasn't been brought up yet is the proximity to the SCRD. Our neighbors in Granthams, very close within the town of, the extended town of Gibson's is the SCRD. And I think it's a little bit challenging when a couple blocks away, they're under different rules that are, less strict in some instances. And that kind of feels unfair that we're kind of competing against within the same town. I know it's not, I know it's a different district, but they can just go down the block 4 or 5 blocks in some instances, and they're allowed to have them. So that's just one other point that hadn't been brought up tonight that I think is worth considering if we're going to have really different rules so closely in proximity. That was all.
Robin, thank you very much.
Next, we have Margaret George, who has not spoken yet.
Margaret George, welcome.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm at 701 Steinbrenner Gibson's, and I've already sent in a written submission. I was not planning on speaking. And the only reason I'm calling very briefly is just to say, when I'm hearing the discussions around the need for tourists, I guess I feel as a homeowner, and we've lived in the Gibson's community for over 30 years, that a decision needs to be made as to whether or not tourists completely trump homeowners and community. And as homeowners and taxpayers, I love where we live. I do not like the existence of non-principal resident residential guest accommodation. We have one on our street, you've heard earlier, for a variety of reasons. And without going into the reasons, as I don't think there's a need, and I've already put it in my written submission, I think it comes down to people who have perhaps purchased property as an investment, who are making money, and it's at the expense of us, the people that live there and are grounded to the community and want to be part of the community and want a community to be part of, and not to be out in our neighborhood and not know our neighbors or welcome new neighbors. And there's all sorts of other reasons around the value to having restrictions on, in particular, my issue is with non-principal residents accommodations. But I just ask you to remember who elected you. It's the community, it's not the tourists. And I know that tourists are important, but so are we. And that's all I wanted to say. And I appreciate for being added after the time and after already sending in a written submission. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. George.
So, we have Kathleen, who has spoken once already.
You start video. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All this conversation reminds me in the beginning of the 1980s with the pulp mills of British Columbia, when the government first decided to start seriously regulating them. And what I remember is the mills said, we will shut down tomorrow. We can't survive government regulation. Now, that's got to be 40 years ago. They did survive it. At that time, they said, look, the mill is a business, it trumps the environment. Well, they've decided it can't trump the environment. And I'm not faulting the mill because they've got a good environmental department and everything else. They've shown that they can live in the environment. We can still have our environment. I don't go to these kind of accommodations. I don't stay in them. I did once, and I discovered when I was in Ireland that it was such a dispute in the whole country. The person that owned the place I was staying actually lived in Toronto, and I thought, I can't be part of this. When I go to Tofino now, I stay at a resort. I don't want to be a part of destroying someone else's community the way these places can potentially destroy my own. So I'm going to say very strongly, I really support these regulations the same way I support regulations for the environment, regulations of other industries. They need to be regulated. That's part of what it is for us to survive everything that is going on with the environment and with housing right now. And we can't do it without strong regulations. And we can't do it if people can't step forward, and I support you 100%. Thank you.
Kathleen, thank you.
Next, we have Blake McLeod.
Hey, again, Blake McLeod, 1014 Venture Way in Gibson. It's funny the things that occur to you when you're listening to other people speak brilliantly on a topic. Since the pandemic ended, sorta, here, not so much the global south. We've observed down in, for instance, at Bonnybrook, which I know isn't Gibson's, but a lot of us love to go down there. We've observed recently a whale go back and forth and eventually give birth and train its baby and swim off. And we watched nature come back and so on. And then not too long ago, we watched the first cruise ship go by. And in my heart sank. I'm not of the cruise ship set, but it made me start thinking about what would happen if there weren't cruise ships. And it makes me think also, and this is what triggered, that was the business case being made by the business community, which of course we're all very dependent on and appreciative of the work that proponents for the business community do. But you know, the question is, or actually the fact is that before there were cruise ships, business was fine. Cruise ships came along and created an opportunity, and now cruise ships are a blight. That's my opinion. But it is a massive industry, and business interests fight to protect it. And there's lobbyists and so on. So yes, tourist accommodation is very important to the economy. And if a finer point needs to be put on it, it's no good inviting people up if there are no workers. And it's no good letting go of accommodation for workers or just, you know, regular folks. Like your kids are ready to move out and what are they going to do? They're eventually they move in because it's desperate and it's a social dysfunction. So this clearly to me seeks to address that, but also to balance other interests. And as I say, I think it could use a little more nuance. But the other thing is when we talk about the troubles we're having with our medical system, and I've thought for years, it's almost like it's being broken on purpose, so that the lobby for private care, private medical care can slip further in and further in. And eventually those things that we value greatly in society, Canadian society particularly, our liberal democracy, social democracy, become whittled down, diluted, and we start to resemble that which we didn't like and that we used to be proud to distinguish ourselves as being different from. So as much as people are going to argue for maintaining the financial benefits of that, there will be a period of adjustment, and it's important that this amendment has built in a time period for that. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod.
Next, we have Des Delaney.
Mr. Delaney, you're on for the third time, which gives you 2 minutes.
Great. Just as a final comment, I think you've also got to take into consideration that when, if there is 100 so units on Airbnb, that when you take action like this, legal action is almost certain when you go after a group of this size and it affects their income. Across the board on some subjects that I brought up on my first ramble, I guess, is that, you know, there's been very little community real consultation on what the big picture for this community is. We're running around issuing out development permits left, right, and center for all these projects that may never happen for years and years and years. And yet, you know, the tourist industry, sure, these are low-paying jobs, but that's not the fault of the people that are operating these businesses. They're the ambassadors for the community. They're the people that people come and stay, and they got a beautiful community. This is great. They support the businesses. They love the environment. They go walking out everywhere. These are the people we want to come and experience here. My wife runs an Airbnb. Round about now, 50% of her guests are returns from a variety of countries or from Vancouver or whatever. They come here with their families, they get away, they enjoy their life. It is just, you know, it's a Gibson's an experience. And, you know, why are you throwing that out? You know, for why? For why? It's kind of baffling that it's just so little information that this very restrictive bylaws based on. So, you know, I guess it's just one of those things where once again, the community has to get together and look at legal aspects in order to try and get the council's attention. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney.
Next, we have David Neufeld, who has not had a chance to speak yet.
Mr. Neufeld, are you there?
He's now off the list. So let's try him again here. Need to accept the invite. There we go.
Hello, sorry about that. First time using this. My name is David Neufeld, 2 Franklin Street. Wasn't planning on talking, but just wanted to express position to this law for a few reasons. There's been a few comments. One about community, and another about big business. My wife and I recently purchased a home in Gibsons. We love it. Love the community there. We bring our kids there. We want to establish memories in Gibsons with our family. We're not big business. The only way that we can afford this is short-term rentals. So we do love the community, and we're not big business. We would like to be part of the conversation. This feels like it's coming really, really fast, and we'd like to request that more short-term owners are consulted to see if there's possibly another solution. We live in North Vancouver. We're very close. If this bylaw passes, it wouldn't work for us because we want to be in Gibsons more frequently, and we do not want to rent out our place long-term. We would not do that. We would have to look for other areas, which would negatively affect Gibsons. We have spent a lot of money on local businesses furnishing our place. We love it there. We love all the people that we've met and the facilities that are in Gibsons and the Sunshine Coast. We also employ a lot of people, from cleaners, spa maintenance, gardeners, and that would all be lost if this bylaw is passed. So I think that I just want to say that I oppose what's happening right now, and I think there's probably a bigger conversation that needs to happen, and I just would like to be part of that conversation. So thank you very much for your time. Just want to express my opinion and welcome for this bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you.
At this time, seeing that there are still people on the speakers list, I'm going to call a recess for 5 minutes and give people a chance to refresh their waters or whatever. So if we can do that, put everybody on hold for 5 minutes, and councillors, you can go off screen if you wish, and we'll see you back here at, I've got on my clock 7:05, so 7:10. Thank you. Too bad you actually couldn't debate with somebody.
Yeah, just sit there and say, I know. So they say, thank you, thank you.
Well, I thought we could say, yeah, we've been doing this for 4 years. Yeah. This is not a recent thing. It's just that it's still not going your way.
You've got two.
I see there's 2 more there.
And then you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I have 7:10. Councillor Lumley may be listening in the background there. We will reconvene our process. So go then to next speaker.
Okay, next we have Jeff Gornell being promoted to panelist.
And first time speaker, so 5
First
minutes.
time speaker, yes.
5 minutes, Mr. Cornell. Can see you on the screen, Mr. Gornell. You're still muted.
Thank you for that. I think I would have figured this out by now after 2.5 years, but here we are. So I'd like to express some thoughts
Sorry,
based
Mr.
on.
Grinnell. Mr. Grinnell, would you give your address, please?
Yes, it's 851 Ingalls Drive.
Thank you.
So I am on the Sunshine Coast Board of Tourism, as well as run Tapworks Brewing Company. I'm one of the founders there. Part of our discussions with Sunshine Coast Tourism around this particular bylaw and short-term rental regulation in general is that we want to tread lightly here as a society because we don't know the economic impact, the long-term impact of what a major change in regulation like this is going to do to tourism on the coast. I am a huge proponent of affordable housing, and I think that I applaud council's efforts to address the issue. I think in this particular issue, we'd be looking at a number of long-term units that would have insufficient impact to warrant the grave risks associated with such a drastic change. And I'd like to see, at the very least, in conjunction, a plan that replaces the short-term rental or visitor accommodation that's would be suitable for the Sunshine Coast as these bylaws are rolled out, or as supply of short-term rentals becomes limited as a result of the implementation of these bylaws. You know, we're not like Whistler. We're not like these major tourist destinations where there's a plethora of hotels and different accommodators to choose from. And I think that hasn't been sufficiently taken into account when it comes to these particular bylaws. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Next, we have Wanda Selzer.
Another first-time speaker.
Another first-time speaker.
Thank you. Wanda, you're unmuted. We can't see you, but that's okay.
Sorry, I apologize.
Hey, that's all right.
I don't know why all my videos off. That's why. Okay, so I too wasn't going to speak tonight. I'm at 1047 Fircrest Road in Upper Gibsons, actually, SCRD side. I've decided I would like to applaud the council and ask you to stay the course on your bylaws. There seems to be this impression that and that this is going to dry up short-term rentals. I'm sorry, the other term. It seems very clear to me that if you're going to operate a business, then you're going to need a business license. I mean, that's expected, and I don't think that the town shouldn't benefit from those added the added business. There also seems to be an impression that council has thrown this at the town at a sort of like almost out of left field. I mean, I am aware that short-term rentals has been on the council's radar since 2019, and we are in 2022, and finally looking at some bylaws that in essence do not cancel necessarily any short-term rentals that are already existing. The phase out for commercial, I think you're being extremely generous. So, I admit that the coast does not have a single, it's impossible given the way our governmental structure is, but that there's also been, the SCRD has developed their own. They already have, they're ahead of us, really. They already have some regulations around short-term rentals and bed and breakfasts. have seemed to have lumped their regulations together. And Gibson's is simply doing it differently, and I think extremely fairly. I think that that the people that are panicking, I was sort of in favor of the other woman talking about the panic when pulp mills had to be regulated, and in the end, everybody learned how to manage. And so I don't want council to think that there's a majority of people that are thinking that you have been blindsiding the poor and the poor short-term rental people. They will all be able to operate within what I think is extremely fair regulations. They don't have to go anywhere. They just need to be safe accommodations. They have to be able to pass, health and safety rules and pay their business license. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, and I'm behind you guys. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Next, we have Judith Bunkoff.
Judith, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to weigh in here. Wasn't going to, but I just...
Your address, please. Your address?
Oh, sorry. I'm at 628 Glen Road in Heritage Hills, Gibson's. Okay, so just a few things. I want you to know that I approve of this bylaw. I believe in a balanced approach to this issue. I support phasing out long-term vacation rentals in unoccupied homes. I want to live in a livable community that is not overrun with tourists. I believe if some tourists cannot find accommodation, that's okay. We need to have limits. Perhaps people will rethink this about their suites, and instead of jumping through these hoops, they'll rent out their suites to people who need them to work in our community. And that's exactly what I did. Perhaps investors will stop buying properties up here so that the residents can buy into the market, because if they can't carry on these businesses, then we benefit by getting people who are going to live in our communities. I live in Heritage Hills. I see more and more faces in my neighborhood that I do not recognize. This is in the summer. And I've been here for 17 years now. I walk by homes that were owner-occupied B&Bs that are now completely rented out to vacationers. So I see it. Lastly, I'd like to just tell you that we need an empty home tax along with this bylaw. And that's all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you.
Next on our speakers list, speaking for the second time, is Megan McLean.
Megan, welcome. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll just be brief. I just spoke almost at the very beginning, so just kind of wanted to chime in again after listening.
Megan, your sound is
just
garbled.
one of the previous. Oh no, is that better? No.
Try again.
Hello.
Hello, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to address just a couple of points. So one thing around one of the speakers said that there has been a lot of comparisons made to Squamish and just how much they charge for permits and their permitting process. and agree that Squamish is not a good comparison. They're connected to the mainland, and tourists and workers and people that are prospective kind of people that want to live in Gibsons, they won't necessarily be able to find an accommodation, whereas in Squamish they would. So I really just want to reiterate that it needs to be a nuanced conversation, and not kind of a one size all for the non-residential aspect of things. So I would just hope that we can really look at that piece and really take into account, people such as myself who have been operating for 5.5 years with really no issues, and kind of the why, and really getting to the whys of why we do it versus renting out full time. So thank you for everybody speaking, and I hope that we can really actually learn from this conversation instead of just quickly passing it at the next committee or the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Next on the speakers list, we have Annie Weiss speaking for the second time.
Thank you, Annie. Welcome back, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you again. Just for anyone else who's joined, my name is Annie Wise, and I'm the Executive Director for Sunshine Coast Tourism. You've heard my earlier comments, and our board member, Jeff Gornell, has also weighed in with further emphasis on these same concerns. The one other comment I just wanted to add tonight is that there's this common sentiment that we keep hearing frequently, not only tonight, at other public meetings as well, is that the discussion here is that we're catering to tourists and not to residents. But from my perspective, this couldn't be further from the truth. Everyone you've heard from tonight is a resident, and many of us rely on the tourism economy for our jobs. And to plead with you on a personal level, my ability to live here, to work here, to raise my family here is dependent on tourism. And it's the #1 employing industry on the Sunshine Coast. I am not alone in that fact. And tourism done well can be sustainable, and it can attract responsible travelers to visit the region and that cherish our community alongside our residents. Are we there today? Maybe not. There's work to be done, and I certainly am working on that. My association was working on that, and I believe in partnership with many organizations, individuals, and local governments such as yourself along the way. I just think it's really, really important for not only to you, council, but also to people listening on this call that I firmly don't believe that my organization, the board members and business community that we represent has any interest in sidelining the residents of this community. But it is important. There is not a lot of other primary industry to drive the economic economic driver of this community, and it's just not there. And so tourism is there. It's the opportunity ahead of us, and I would really encourage the community to come alongside and find. I think there's a needle to be thread here that supports reasonable, balanced regulation that means nobody should have to live next to a party house that's bumping every night at 2 a.m. for 365 days a year. That's ridiculous. We certainly don't support that or want to see that. But to eliminate many operators, which is exactly what the 50 temporary use permits will do, and then certainly then the phased out approach over a couple of years doesn't seem to find that balance either. So just encourage you to keep trying to thread that needle, and for the residents on the call to know that we're residents too, and this industry matters, and we can work together as a community, and it doesn't have to be at odds with one another. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie.
Next, we have Kathleen speaking for the third time.
Okay.
Kathleen, welcome back.
It's actually
David
It's my
Kipling.
computer. So the one that Kathleen was using, we're doing it. So I'm a separate person.
Yeah, and you are?
My name is David Kipling, and I live at 790 Bayview Heights Road, Lower Gibson.
David Kipling, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to take a minute to throw in, we seem to, I think we've pretty much been listening tonight. Gibson's has been swept away by the notion that this is, that we are tourism, that Gibson's is tourism. And to the extent that somebody was suggesting that we can't even build a hotel because we have to bring in people from outside. And it's extraordinary because my friends and acquaintances are carpenters and they're plasterers and they're painters and they're welders and they're plumbers and they're electricians and they live here, and some of them need a place to rent because they can't buy a house. And somebody, one was a friend who in the last 2 years was renting, and he's been thrown out so that his landlord can turn the house into a short-term rental. Another one who was a roofer has been turned out of the house he was renting because the landlord said he's going to move in and for himself, although he hasn't. And so it's extraordinary that we've got this kind of, and it's a very attractive fantasy that Gibson's is tourism. Well, it's not. And there are surveyors and there are architects and there are loggers and there are who drives the trucks, who mends the trucks, who does the welding. They're here on the coast. And it seems that if these people can't rent a house to live in permanently while they're working here, why the hell are we saying that we depend on tourism and we must open up rooms for tourists? So please just think outside the box of tourism. And otherwise, I support any kind of strict regulation of short-term rentals, because there are roofers and electricians who need somewhere. They're going to build the houses that you live in. And sometimes you forget who builds the roads and who places the concrete. And the people, and they are coast residents, some born on the coast, and we depend on them far more than we depend on somebody swanning across and buying a $20 hamburger. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Kipling, thank you.
So Mayor Beamish, we have no new hands up.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody who has spoken. I appreciate that. We listened. Some of you are new to the coast. I appreciate that. One thing that was mentioned by one presenter is that they were aware that this has been worked on since 2019. This is actually the second public hearing that we've had on this issue. And after the first public hearing, we went back to the drawing board and came up with a different bylaw. So appreciate you might want to kind of take a look at some of the history here on this and take a look at some of the changes that were made. So that it is not, council is not treated as lightly at this stage in time. I appreciate the comments and concerns that have been expressed this evening. And I believe that the corporate officer has some additional emails, correspondence that's been received, which she will then inform us about.
We still have a speaker that would like to speak again, Judith Bunkoff, for the second time.
Okay, we'll listen to Judith for a second time.
Hi, my name is Judith Bonkoff. I live in 628 Glen Road in Gibsons. Just one more thing about the benefits of tourism, listening to Sunshine Coast Tourism, and my heart goes out to them. I was a business owner in Lower Gibsons. And yes, we had a lot of tourists, and this was, I'm going to go back 8 years ago. And I was so busy in the summer and absolutely dead in the winter. So all those employees that I could hire in the summer, I had to let go in the winter. We need a balance. We can't just keep on building on tourism if we don't have full-time work for them all year round and full-time places for them to live in. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Okay, I'll now ask the Deputy Corporate Officer to note and present any written submissions received during this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. We have several here. Give me a moment to get them organized. So the first one is from N. Naidu. It came in today at 6:40. Hello, I am a social worker on the Sunshine Coast, and having lived here for over 7 years, housing has always been an issue. This has been a constant struggle, and we are in dire need of affordable housing. I do not think limiting short-term rentals will make a difference since the cost of rent has gone up across Canada. Best, Natasha Naidu. I have another one here from Wanda Seltzer, 6:30. Dear Council, thank you for this thoughtful approach to this bylaw. We too moved over to the coast in pieces. We rented the house, 2 tenants stayed 5 years each and lived on the weekends in 2 tiny rooms in the basement for 10 years. So it can be done. And Airbnb operators who are super hosts rent over 100 times. You are not denying anyone the right to operate a RGA. Everyone thinks they are special. Business licenses are a great idea. You are, in my opinion, preserving Gibsons for residents who ultimately have to serve tourists who are just passing through. Thank you, Wanda Seltzer, 1047 for Crest Road, Gibsons. I have one here from David Neufeld at 6:35. Dear City Council, we own a home on Franklin Street in Gibsons and want to outline our opposition to this short-term bylaw. There is no supporting evidence from other communities that would indicate restrictions of this service would increase the long-term rental pool. In order to increase the rental pool, bylaws to support increased development and reduce timeframe for permits should be reviewed and streamlined to fast-track rental property development. I firmly believe that a restriction of Airbnb will negatively affect small business instead. We have spent tens of thousands of dollars locally supporting businesses on the Sunshine Coast just to make our property ready to rent. We employ a cleaner, a gardener, a pool cleaner, and a handyman to keep our house in tip-top shape. These jobs would all disappear if this bylaw passes. This is just what my wife and I spend to have a vacation rental home in Gibsons. This does not include what our guests spend while on vacation. This is also another simple fact that Gibsons simply does not have enough hotel rooms to accommodate the demand for tourism. Finally, I would like to mention that we only rent our home for about half the year and live in our home the other half of the year. We love our time on the Sunshine Coast and love the experience our children have while visiting. We do not want to leave this beautiful location, but would not be able to afford the house without short-term rentals, and we would not be interested in renting the long-term. We would like to continue the conversation and request more time to be part of this decision. Best regards, and thank you for listening to my opinions. Regards, David Neufeld. Whew, they're
Take a breath.
yeah, they're coming in quickly now.
Can these be forwarded to us, or?
They'll be part of the whole package, the summary package as well.
But she
has to be read into the record tonight.
It does, eh? Okay.
So from Trish Neufeld, 652 to the town of Gibsons. Please add to the minutes of this evening's meetings. We own a home in Lower Gibsons and we cannot rent our property to long-term rent tenants. My mother lives overseas and comes to stay 4 to 5 months each year. My husband and I each work 40 to 50 hours per week and have worked so hard to purchase this property. Our goal is to have a home that we can enjoy with our children away from the city and one day move here full time. We cannot afford to leave our commitments in the Lower Mainland just yet and rely on the income from the short-term rentals in order to meet our financial obligations. Our guests bring their families to Gibson's and spend their tourism dollars on local businesses. We carefully approve each one of our guests and have the full support of our neighbors. We have spoken to our neighbors in every direction. They would rather we have vetted short-term guests rather than full-time tenants. We have a lot on the line with this proposed bylaw, and if it passes, we may have to sell. Again, we will never rent to long-term tenants. Thank you for your consideration, Trish Neufeld. Oh. The next one came in at 7:13 from Annie Wise. Says, hello, please see the attached letter from the Sunshine Coast Tourism regarding the town of Gibson's proposed bylaws regarding residential guest accommodations. We hope to offer additional information and context by way of this letter to help the town, staff, and council in your decision-making. We appreciate the complexity of the issue and hope to continue as both a voice of local tourism industry and a supporting partner to local government. If you have any questions or would like further discussion, please welcome the opportunity to meet with you at your convenience. Warm regards, Annie Wise, and she has an attached letter. Oh, I've got it here. Thanks, Rebecca. Residential guest accommodations proposed bylaw. Dear Mayor and Council, Sunshine Coast Tourism would like to thank the Town of Gibson staff, Mayor and Council for their careful consideration of these regulations. We appreciate the difficulty and nuance of the discussion with many different perspectives and conflicting interests. We firmly believe that tourism is the economic lifeblood of our community and provides many benefits to all residents of the region, whether they realize it or not. As an association, we support reasonable compliance measures to ensure that residential guest accommodations, RGAs, are accountable to the town for the health and safety of the residents and guests in our community. I would like to provide additional context in the form of the economic value that RGAs provide within Gibson's using data from our air DNA license and research published by Destination BC. We can share that STR guests contributed approximately $9.5 million in local spending. 14,000 room nights were booked at RGAs within the town of Gibson's in the last 12 months. The average BC traveler spends $341 per day during their trip. Assuming those room nights were at minimum double occupancy, that represents tourism spending of approximately $9.5 million in the last year, directly attributed to RGA guests in Gibson's. 14,000 room nights times 2 people at $341 spending per day. Of that 9.5 million, travelers spend approximately 3.3 million on the accommodation itself, and the remaining 6.2 on restaurants, activities, shopping, gas, etc. These are very conservative estimates, as travelers from outside BC are known to spend much more daily. In addition to the economic information, I would like to express a couple of additional thoughts and concerns and my encouragement to you to make your final decisions with a balanced approach. First, limiting RGAs to a certain number of operation days per year, 90 or otherwise, will negatively impact the winter shoulder season. If limited to 90 days, these operators may choose to host in the lucrative summer months, which works as cross purposes with Sunshine Coast Tourism's mandate to grow tourism in the winter shoulder season when it's most needed to support local economy. Secondly, I applaud the inclusion. I can see the end, you guys. I applaud the inclusion of more long-term planning concerning commercial guest accommodation. However, I do not believe the stated plans in the policy are currently adequate. The policy as written states that the George will be built in the near term and the Stonehurst Inn development application is in progress. With the recent expiration of the George's permit and significant changes to Stonehurst developers' plans, it is my perspective that there is, in fact, no new commercial guest accommodation on the horizon in the next 2 years when the first phase of the TUPs are set to expire. I urge you to review these timelines regarding both the phased approach with TUPs and building new commercial guest accommodation. And further to this point, even on a phased approach, the suggested 50 TUPs will in fact still be a shock to the business environment in Gibsons that depends on RGAs currently. Our data via AirDNA shows 118 unique whole home units were rented in the last 12 months in Gibsons. These units, I believe, would fall into the category of requiring TUPs in the new proposed regulations. It's essential to understand and acknowledge the disparity between 118 and 50 units of accommodation and the reduction of potentially hundreds of visitors per day as a result. Lastly, Council is aware of the impact that banning a significant number of short-term rentals will have on the MRDT income for our region and Sunshine Coast Tourism's programs. One program we created in the last 2 years is specifically related to affordable housing initiatives. 60% of the online accommodation platform MRDT revenues are returned to local government and set aside for use on affordable housing plans. In 2021, we sent 86,000 to the SCRD for the regional plan, which supports the town of Gibsons as well. And in 2022, we expect to send 93,000. This is money collected by Airbnbs in the region from their guests, the paying guests, and returned to the community as an affordable housing fund. This funding will most definitely decrease with the implementation of these proposed regulations. In summary, we support reasonable compliance measures to ensure that RGAs are accountable to the town for the health and safety of the residents and guests in our community. However, before new RGA regulations are adopted, we urge Council to consider the additional context shared in this letter and develop an official plan to attract and retain visitor accommodation inventory. Thank you for your time and consideration. Annie Weiss, Executive Director, Sunshine Coast Tourism. Phew. And there is one last one. Thank you, Annie. She's sent me a note here. From Des Delaney at 7:35. I am unsure why the Director of Planning did not present the full bylaw to the hearing at the introduction. And that is all I have, Mayor Beamish.
Thank you very much. And yeah, lots of reading. Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody's input. There being no further input at this time, we will adjourn this hearing. We will be bringing this back to council for a further consideration in July. Councilor Ladwig, who is not with us tonight, will be present that time. Staff will be preparing a report on the basis of this public hearing, and that information will be on an agenda prior to council considering this matter the next time. So thank you for your attendance. Thank you especially for your participation. And we will have another opportunity to have a discussion on this issue. Thank you. Thank you, staff, as well, for your attendance and support tonight. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned, and I have what I have time-wise.